romper. It's Bloomer's romper. Very vintagey looking. I upcycled this from a white nightgown, and I'm going to show you how I did it. Okay, so here's the gown that I got at the thrift store that we're going to be working with. The first thing I did when I got it is washed in OxiClean. I wash all my linens and lace in that, and I also, if I have really bad stained lace and stuff, I soak it for a couple days in OxiClean, and the link for that is in my description down below. So if you want to give it a shot, highly recommend it. So the first thing I'm going to do with this dress is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut. This one doesn't have a seam, but right where the seam would be at the top, I'm going to completely cut that open on both sides. Okay, so this is the gown with the shoulders cut. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm turning this into a romper, and it won't be a dress. It'll be like bloomers. And so I need to step into it, and this wouldn't have been large enough for me to step into. So I'm going to add ties at the shoulder that you just tie into like a cute little bow when you get it on. And in order to do that, I need to make this more narrow because I want my ties to be narrow. And I am going to do a little stitching on it, and I'm using aqua thread because I'm going to dye it aqua. If you dye any fabrics, try to use the same color thread that you're going to dye the garment with, because sometimes this won't dye. So what I'm doing is I'm just basting this. It's just sort of a temporary little stitch, and I've got a knot at the end of my thread. And then I'm just doing big stitches all the way across. Then I'm going to pull that tight so it's nice and small. And then I'll just put a knot here to hold it in place while I make my straps. Okay, so making the ties for the top of the shoulders on the romper is going to be so simple. I always have a sheet that I've thrifted laying around because I use it for so many things. This is an old bed sheet, and I am just going to make a snip 3/4 of an inch wide and just rip it. Okay, from that long strip I just ripped, I cut 4 15-inch pieces of fabric, and these are going to be the ties. Simple as that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, remember we have 4 pieces that we basted together here. On each one of those, I'm going to take one of those strips, and I'm just going to lay it on top and do a zigzag stitch probably 4 times across, back and forth about 4 times, just so it's nice and sturdy. Okay, so this is what we have so far. We have the ties sewn on. Whoops. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, this nightgown comes to about my ankles, and I'm going to make bloomers with some lace that are hiked up a little. So what I'm going to do is cut 8 inches off of the bottom. Just lay it flat on my table, measure up 8 inches, and cut it. Here I'm just measuring up the 8 inches, and I'm marking it with a pin. You can use a marking tool of some sort if you want. Okay, so what I'll do next is I will make these into pants, but before I do that, I want to sew on all the embellishments. It'll make it a lot harder if they're pants. So while it's a dress, it's way easier to sew what you need on there. And I'm going to start with some big pockets. I'm going to make my pockets out of this long vintage table runner. And remember, when you're putting embellishments on your garment, your dress, bloomers, whatever, if you're going to dye it, try to use 100% natural fabrics. Like this is 100% cotton, you know, linen, silk, things like that. They dye so much nicer, and synthetic fabrics sometimes don't dye at all. There is synthetic dye, but I don't trust it. I don't know. Let me know what you think about that if you've tried it. What I did was mark up 11.5 inches and made a mark there, 11.5 inches. And I'm just going to cut that straight across. And I did to this end too, because I want 2 pockets, so 11.5 inches. Okay, so now I have my little rectangles, square. I want lace at the top. I want lace all the way around. So I am just taking a doily that I have in my stash. You know, a lot of people ask me where I get my lace, and some thrift stores I go to will have some thrift stores more than others, but generally I order it off of eBay. I type in lot of vintage lace. And so I am going to take this doily and I'm just cutting around the edge here. Leaves me with a little flower. I might use it another point, but so that gives me kind of a long piece of lace. I'll cut it in half, and then I will go to my machine and I will just stitch that across the top of each one of these pockets just to make it a little cuter. Okay, so now I need to pin my pockets onto my dress, and I always put my dress on and pin the 4 corners. That way you make sure your pockets or your hands are going to fit right in there. I've made that mistake by trying to do it, just kind of guessing where they might go, and it's almost always wrong. So I've learned to just put it on, and what I did was pin 4 corners on both sides, and then I'll take it off, and then I'll do a lot more pinning because I need to sew these on. Okay, so now I have all the pins in my pocket. I always stick a piece of cardboard in between the 2 layers of dress of the fabric. It makes it so much easier to pin, and these shipping boxes are just perfect for that. So, oops. I have both pockets completely pinned, and now I'm going to go to my machine, and I'm going to start at the very top and go down and around, and I'm going to avoid the lace for 2 reasons. I want the lace to be kind of free-flowing and dimensional, but it's also a lot more durable if you sew on the actual fabric and not the lace. So I'm just going to follow this solid line all the way around, and I can either do just a regular stitch and go twice because we want it to be durable because it's a pocket, or I could just do a small tight zigzag stitch, which is what I will opt to do. And all that extra stitching from the zigzag will make it more durable than a regular stitch also. Okay, now that I have my pocket sewn on, it's time to decorate the rest of the dress. And I went to my stash. I have a tub here of, you know, some embroidered linens and things like that. And then I have a little basket of different vintage laces. And I'll show you what I do with those. Okay, so these are the linens and lace that I chose. It's kind of hard to see because it's white on white, I know, but so down towards the bottom, I just used a sort of scallop doily, and over here I used a vintage napkin or hanky, I guess. I just used this pretty piece of lace up towards the top here, and then on the side in the front, another little piece of embroidered linen trimmed in lace. And I'm kind of putting that at an angle to avoid the armhole. And so what I'll do now is I'll take my cardboard again and I'll slip it in between the 2 layers of the dress. and underneath each one of these, and I'll pin it all on very securely. And then I will go to my machine and I will stitch around every single one of them. I typically do a zigzag stitch or a really small regular stitch. Or not super small. If it's too small, it takes you forever to sew, and I don't like that. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine and sew these 4 pieces on. Okay, here's what we have so far. Here's the front. And when you're done sewing all your patches, lace, whatever on the front, you turn it around and you do the same thing to the back. And here I did some doilies, and notice that I didn't stitch all the way to the edge because I want those to stick out a little bit and have some dimension. And then did a pretty sort of net lace rectangle in the center. Let's see. Yeah, just some laces and some linens. Now, I strategically placed the 2 big patches on the rear end because my gown is a little see-through and I want it to cover some discrete areas. And also when I dye this a darker color, that'll help with it being see-through. Now let me show you. This is old, and so it's a little worn, has a little hole. Oh, it's not focusing in very well, but I'm going to just cover that with a piece of lace. Okay, so now it's time to turn this dress into a bloomer's romper. And I want it to be kind of a low, baggy drop crotch. And I also want it to have nice wide legs. So what I'm going to do is basically sew a teeny little triangle in here and cut it out, and that'll separate it. And how I will do that is I measured up from the bottom 10 inches. And then you can't see, but I have a little pin here that I marked. That's up 10 inches. And then where that pin is, I go across my dress and I find the center. And so this is 28 inches across. So my center would be 14. And I'm just going to put a little dot right there. And then what I do is I go to the bottom and I find my center. And I already found my center and put a little mark there. And then on each side of that little mark, 1 inch to this side, I make a little mark. And then 1 inch to this side, I make a little mark. And then that center mark we made there, I'm going to connect this outside dot to that one and draw a line. And then you might not use a black marker, but I'm just doing it so you can see. I'll sew outside that line so I can cut that out. You won't see it. And then at the very outside dot here, lined up with that center one, I'm going to draw another line. Now, I am going to pin this line, and I'll show you that in a second, very securely, because I don't want that to shift around because that's exactly where I want it. So I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so I pinned right along those lines. Now I'm going to go to my machine. I always say gonna. I need to say going to go to my machine. And I'm going to stitch. You would stitch right on that line if you're not using a black marker, but I'm using a black marker, so I'm going to go right outside of that line twice with a semi-small stitch. You don't have to go super small since you're going to double stitch that. Okay, now I have this triangle double stitched. I'm just going to cut it out on the inside of the stitching. Okay, here it is. Now we have pants. And what I need to do now is I'm going to add lace at the bottom of these legs. So I need to turn it back inside out and go grab my lace. Okay, what I've decided to do is make my lace approximately 8 inches. Okay, so I'm adding lace to the bottom of the legs, and I want to add about 8 inches of lace. Now it's going to be give or take, and that's what kind of makes it look cool. So I just took some of my larger pieces of lace and just cut them approximately 8 inches tall. So there's some that look like this, and then I have one that looks like this. I want them all shapes and sizes. And here's one that I still need to cut. So this is just kind of a, I don't know, kind of a table runner. And I'm just going, I left my yardstick at the other table, so I'm just going to use this for my 8-inch gauge. So I just take this and I cut about 8 inches. And then I will kind of eyeball it and piece these together on my legs, the bottom of my legs, until I get a look that I like. And then I stitch them on. I'll show you though in a second when I get them all kind of arranged. I think I'm going to go with a look sort of like this. There are times I've kind of pleated them and made them ruffly, but I don't want this to be all ruffly and cutesy. I want it to be more hippie bohemian. So when I sew these on, I'm going to just sew them straight across without doing anything fancy. And I will just sew them. I'll stick my leg into my sewing machine, remove that front plate, and just stitch it around. I'll do a zigzag stitch, and I won't pin this or anything. I will take a pile over to my sewing machine just like this. There's no exact science to this. This is the artistic part of it. And so when I'm at my machine, I just stick this in and I just grab one, sew along, pick one that I think might look good next to it, and I just go all the way around and just keep it really simple for myself. Here's what it looks like with the lace that we added at the bottom. Very cute. So here I brought my dressmaker's mannequin and the bloomers up on my table so I can show you what I'm going to do now. I want to hike up the side a little bit with a little ruching done my way. I'm not a seamstress, I just kind of do things my way. And this side I've already started. Do you see how that has little gathers in there? I am going to show you how to start that on this side because this one's started. What I did was I found the seam on the side of my bloomers and I measured up from the top of the lace 7.5 inches, and I made a little mark with a pencil. And what I will do is this is just kind of basting to get it in the shape I want before I sew it. So I just take my needle and I have a knot at the end of my thread, but I guess it's not very big. So I'll go in here a couple times just to hold that sturdy. And then I'll go on the front side of the seam. Here's the front of the bloomers. There's the seam. I'm going to go just a little bit in front of that, all the way up to that pencil mark. And what I'll do is I'll just weave fairly large stitches in and out. all the way up to that pencil mark. I did my stitching all the way up to the pencil mark, and now what I'll do is I'll just pull that string and it'll create those cute little pleats ruching, and I'll hold it here, and just at the top I'm going to just knot it a couple times so it stays nice and sturdy in the way we want it. Okay, now I'll just clip that thread, and what I'll do next is take it to my machine, and where I made that little ruching right there, I want it to be a lot more sturdy than just a little basting thread. So I will sew over top of that. I'll start down here, basically at the top of the lace or right on the lace, and I'll zigzag stitch all the way to the top. You can go over a couple times if you want, but before I begin my stitching, I made these cute little bows out of the same bed sheet that I did with the ties, 3/4 inch wide. Each one of these are 45, the strip was 45 inches long because I want a nice long, kind of fringy looking bow. And so when I start my sewing on this fringe, I'm going to begin by putting this on the lace. I'll stitch over that, and then I'll go up and do my ruching. That way we have a cute little detail on the leg. I hope that makes sense. Here, I laid it out on the table to give you a sort of a better look of what I did. Maybe you can get a sense here. I tied the bow here at the bottom of that ruching and just did a zigzag stitch to hold that in place. Super cute. We're done with the sewing part of it. Super cute. Now we're going to dye it. Now I'm going to dye the romper aqua. And I'm using Rit dye, and it's aquamarine. And yes, I put it right in my washer. And a lot of people sort of gasp when they watch me do it on videos and ask me, does it ruin your washer? Is it gonna ruin the next load of clothes? It never has for me. I just do a completely empty load when I'm done, just to wash the inside of the washer. I'll put laundry detergent and everything and just run it empty so that it sort of cleans it. And I've never had an issue. So, I'm gonna go upstairs and put this in my washer with a cup of salt. The directions are all on the back if you ever wanna try the dye. Maybe you already have. Okay, so my romper is sort of thin, and I want to be able to wear something underneath of it, and I'm just gonna customize what I wear underneath of it a little bit. I have this tank top, and I'm hoping it has a high cotton blend, otherwise it won't dye that great, but I'm gonna take a chance. So I'll put that underneath the romper, and hopefully it'll match the romper. It'll be the same aqua color. And I also have these little boy shorts, and I'm pretty sure those are cotton. I'm going to dye those. So the tank top and these underneath I think would be really cute. And when I dye stuff, I also dye an extra piece of fabric. Like this is cotton or possibly linen, it's vintage. Sometimes when you dye stuff, you'll get a weird blotch of color somewhere that you don't like, or you'll get done and you'll be like, oh, I really wish I would have done a patch over here, or I found a hole, I really want to patch. So I always just dye something extra in case I need to make adjustments when I'm all done. Here I am in the laundry room. I started my washer and let it fill up for about 4 minutes. And then I'm going to add a cup of salt. And I am going to add this entire bottle of dye. I'm going to put a link in my description below the video so that if you like how the romper turns out, the color, then you can get the exact same one. Now, I'm going to let that fill up for maybe 5 more minutes, and then I'll put my garments in there. I am adding all my items, and when that's done washing, I'm going to dry it in my dryer, and then I'm going to show it to you again.